Hello YouTube and welcome back to another alternate history video, and today we got the 2004 election, which of course was held between President George W. Bush and Democrat John Kerry. But in this alternate scenario I got Governor Bill Richardson, who was the governor of New Mexico back then, and he actually ran for president in 2008. However, like I said, in this alternate scenario I got if he decided to run in 2004 and got the nomination. Now, of course, 2004 was a very interesting time. We had the war in Iraq and things like that. Bush's popularity kind of declined because of that war. But obviously, way after, like a few years, especially when the recession hit, his popularity definitely went down. But he presented himself as a strong leader, leading us in Iraq, which kind of helped him against Kerry. It was a close election in the electoral margin, but like I said, he definitely pushed himself as a strong leader, which kind of helped and touted Kerry as too liberal, and Kerry, of course, pointed Bush failing to lead us, but Bush made himself as a strong leader, so it definitely was an interesting time, and we'll see if Bill here could possibly beat him, but we'll just find out. Now, on the West Coast here, of course, I believe Washington was solid good for Bill. It was like a likely margin to Kerry, so I believe it was about the same for him. However, Oregon was a close state, and it was close in 2000 as well, but of course, the suburbs helped Kerry, like Portland and the cities and stuff, and Bush did good in the rural parts. So I believe I would stick with Bill by about the same margin, because he got, like I said, a good suburb support. However, George W. Bush actually had decent suburb support too in 2004, but of course he didn't win Oregon, so I believe that's still good for the Democrats, as well as California would be solid. Oops. There we go, California. And of course Hawaii, very high minority population, would go good with Bill. And his home state in New Mexico, of course he was the governor there, he was very popular, so I believe that would be a solid margin for him to actually win for George W. Bush, because he did go with Hispanics, but with Bill being Hispanic himself, of course, and like I said, being the governor of the state, being popular, I believe it would be a likely, if not safe, margin for him. As well as Colorado, Bill could make a play, because like I said, George W. Bush, this was a pretty solid conservative state back then. Like I said, Bush did go with Hispanics in this year, but like I said, Bill would do very great with them too, of course, being one himself, so I believe he definitely could make a play in the state. If I had to go with my gut, I think he actually could flip this state. Now, it might be kind of a controversial call, but like I said, it wasn't that. It was actually a close margin in the real scenario, because Colorado was trending blue, and it still is, and now it's a pretty solid blue state. And like I said, with Bill being from this region, and he could definitely turn out the high Hispanic population in the state, I could see him flipping it. So, like I said, if you agree or disagree, that's fine, but I believe actually it will go him. So I'll give it to him. However, these other states here, like Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, would obviously be solid for Bush, as well as Utah. He did win Nevada, and I could see Bill making it closer, like I said, with Latino support. But I think Nevada was still a little too rural for even Bill to win back then, so I believe it would stick with Bush by about the same margin. As well as Arizona, you could definitely get good Hispanic support there, but I believe they were still too conservative and a little too rural back then for Bill to win. As well as Great Plains states, the Dakotas, all of Nebraska, even the second would be pretty solid, I'm sure. Kansas, Oklahoma, Bush's home state of Texas, Alaska, the South, of course, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, South Carolina. I believe Missouri would be pretty solid, and Indiana too. And Georgia, of course, wasn't really a contested state back then, so I believe that would be pretty solid for Bush. Now, these other states like Illinois, I believe would go solid for Bill because of Chicago, and of course Northeast like Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C. Now, New Hampshire could be interesting because it was close. Kerry was, of course, from this region. He was from Massachusetts, and he won New Hampshire by a couple of points. However, George W. did win it 4 years earlier, and with Kerry now on the ticket, I could see Bush actually flipping the state back to him and keeping it like he won it in 2000. And like I said, with Kerry not being on the ticket, I don't think Bill would have as much support up here. It could still be a close state, but I actually believe George Bush could flip this state back in his column with Kerry not being on the ticket, because he was considered a moderate Republican, so he had great support in this state. So I believe it actually would go him. As well as Virginia, of course, always voted Republican from the 60s up until 2008, so I believe it would go for him because Bush did good, like I said, in the suburbs and around Virginia Beach and stuff, Richmond. Of course, Bill could do pretty decent too, but it was a solid Republican state back then, so I believe we'll go with George still, as well as North Carolina. He won solidly. Wasn't really contested that year, so I believe that would go for him. Now, Florida could be closer, because like I said, Bill could drive up the Hispanics out, but of course, like I said, Bush did decent with them too. And since they tend to vote for incumbents, I believe it would still go for George W., but I believe it could be closer in the actual margin because of the Hispanic and Cuban factor. I believe it could be probably by a couple points if I had to go with my gut, but I believe it would slow down for George like it did in the actual scenario. Now, the Midwest here, George Bush narrowly did win Iowa against John Kerry. Al Gore won it 4 years earlier. However, I don't believe Bill would probably have that same appeal in these states, but I believe it could still be close. However, like I said, I think Bill probably would regress some because his strength, of course, like I said, would be out here where he was from in states like these. But I believe he probably wouldn't have that same appeal as Kerry and Gore, so I believe they would be pretty solid for Bush, Iowa, and Ohio. And that puts Bush over the top at 282. Now, the rest of the states, however, have been solid Democrat for years, like Minnesota, I believe would go for Bill. Wisconsin and Michigan were pretty close, but of course Kerry did better with the unions. And I believe Bill would do the same since Bush didn't win them either time. So I believe that would go for Richardson, like I said, as well as Pennsylvania. They were pretty close states, but like I said, Kerry just had the edge with unions and working class people in these states. And of course, like I said, didn't go for Bush either time, so I believe Richardson will hold on to him as well as New York. And now Maine, it was all won by Kerry, so I believe it would actually be won by Bill too. The second district wasn't really in contention back then like it is now, and it's pretty solid Republican now. Of course, Trump won it both times. However, I believe it would go solid for Bill since it were more solid for Democrats back in the day. And here's my final map. We put Bush over the top still at 282 to Bill Richardson's 256. And if you agree, disagree, just leave your thoughts below. I thank you for watching. Subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you haven't. And I'll see you next time.